Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third installment of Military Moments by the CAMP Foundation organization. CAMP is the Council on America's Military Past. We are a leading national organization on military history with a focus on preservation and education. We have scholarly publications, including our own journal, the Journal of America's Military Past, or known as JAMP, and we have the Heliogram. Today, we are going to have a lovely presentation by longtime camp member Charles Bogart. Charles is a very accomplished historian, and I had to shorten down his bio quite a bit to give adequate time for his topic. But I'll give you some of his highlights of his really esteemed career, and we're very proud to have him with us. And this whole program is actually his brainchild, so we thank you very much, Charles. But he has taught history at Eastern State and Eastern Kentucky universities. He has published 6 books on various military topics and also the railroad. And he has over 100 scholarly articles published in various aspects of military history. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to stop sharing as we are talking and then pass it over to Charles to do his presentation tonight on the Postal Service during the Civil War. You got it? Just hit the slideshow from the beginning. Yeah, you got it, Charles.
Slideshow.
Yep, right there from the beginning. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go back up to the slideshow again, let me see to that so that you can do it in the presenter view. Yep, from the beginning. Yep.
Well, don't ask me why.
Okay, yeah, just go back to the just one more time and then we'll just proceed as normal. But if you go to that, yeah, from the beginning, I'm sorry to get close to the, yep, from the beginning, click that. Yep.
It
And then, okay. Resume, how about resume slideshow? Underneath it says up there at the top it says slideshow, resume slideshow. Did you see that?
says slideshow.
Yeah, this in okay. Try that again because I saw a little icon that said resume slideshow because you're in kind of a half slideshow view here, but we can still go for it if that's fine. I don't want to hold you up. Yeah, resume. You got it. You just we're on it with the orange.
Hey.
Yeah, there you go. You got it.
Okay.
And please feel free during the presentation to put any questions in the chat, and we will have a session at the end for a question and answer by Charles. Thank you.
Okay. Does my default microphone show up in the? No, it's gone. Why?
No, we can hear you. You're all good.
Okay. Here we go.
There you go.
That's United States and Confederate mail, 1861 to 65. Mail was, the heart and soul of communications back in those days. So it was extremely important for the economy to survive and for the military to function. Now, there's a lot okay. This, I had to throw the couple envelopes in. They're called covers if you're a stamp collector. Davis and Dupree and Company sell slaves in Richmond, Virginia. Thomas A. Powell, auction commissioner and Negro broker, Montgomery, Alabama. So that's my take on why the war was fought. You can argue with me if you want to. February 4th, 1861, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas come together in Montgomery, Alabama, and form the Confederate States of America. And I always thought it was interesting was it was the lower South that was first to leave. They form a post office. They form a government based upon the U.S. government. February 21st, 1861, the Confederate States Post Office is formed, and they have on hand $250,000 in U.S. post office stamps. They just changed the name of the post office from USPO to CSPO, and they're going to operate as if it's just U.S. Post Office. On March 3rd, 1861, John H. Reagan is made the CSA Postmaster General. He was in the U.S. House of Representatives from Texas, and he served on the Committee on Postal Affairs. So it makes sense to take him and put him ahead of the postmaster of the Confederate Post Office because he knows what's going on from being on the Post Office Affairs Committee. And there he is. Now, on the Union side, Abraham Lincoln appoints Montgomery Blair as Postmaster General. Montgomery Blair is from Frankfort, Kentucky. You come to Frankfort and you go down on Broadway, the rear of the railroad tracks is, and there's a historical marker in front of his house. There is Montgomery Blair. Now, on June 1st, 1861, the Confederate Post Office took over all the U.S. post offices. Many of the U.S. Post Office officials from Washington come down and become CS Post Office officials. And it makes sense because what you have is most of the people who are employed in D.C. are from Maryland, D.C., or Virginia. Virginia joins the Confederacy. Most people think Maryland's going to join, and they're offering you more pay. So why not move from D.C. down to Virginia, do it to Richmond, doing your same job for more money, and take all your forms from the U.S. Post Office with you. Now, the high point of this Confederate Post Office is June of 61, when they got the greatest extent of area they're serving. We can argue whether they're serving all Virginia. We can argue if they're serving Kentucky. We can argue if they're serving Missouri. And we can argue if they're out of the Indian Territory and a couple other places. But whatever you want to say, this is the high point. And from this point on, the Confederate Post Office area service is in retreat. Now, big difference between the U.S. Post Office and the Confederate Post Office. The United States Post Office was run as a service. They hoped to make money, but they didn't have to make money. The Confederate Post Office was run as a business. They had to make money. So here's the mail rates, United States up above. You notice they got the 3-cent rate. West of the Rockies, it went up. But in July 61, we got a universal 3-cent rate in the United States for mail and a 2-cent rate for news media. Look down in the South. They got a higher rate to start with, and of course it starts climbing as inflation sets in. The northern states, even though they got inflation, they remain with the that 3-cent drop and the 3-cent first class and the 2 cents media mail. Now, there is no home delivery back in those days. That first blew my mind when they'd have a person's name and just the name of the city, and I go, how in the heck could they get there? Well, that's because they didn't deliver the house. All mail went to the post office. You mailed your stuff at the post office, and you picked your stuff up at the post office. Generally, mail was held for 5 days. Remember, early envelopes or covers would have up the upper left corners after 5 days return to center. Or the post office would advertise in the paper after 5 days you had mail. And then if you came to pick up the mail, there was an added charge because they'd advertised for you. The stamps came along a little bit later. So what we have here on this letter is a stamp. They paid 5 cents. Postmaster, I said, advertised after 5 days, an extra charge. Private bags, pick up and delivery, local and regional. What would happen is you are a businessman down in Jacksonville, Florida, and you don't want to go to the post office in the morning and you don't want to go to the post office in the afternoon. So there's a private individual who comes along, goes to the post office in the morning, has the name of the people who's going to pick up the mail for, picks it up, the postmaster knows who he is, he delivers it to you, and then in the afternoon he comes by, picks that mail up and takes it to the post office to remail it out. Private bag. This was allowed. He was using a U.S. stamp on it, and he was just going to the post office back and forth. The first U.S. postage stamp is issued in 47. Up to then, you are paying the thing, or before that, you're paying it when the letter's been delivered. My mind just closed on me. He was down in Mississippi and he'd been elected president. Was it Polk? And he didn't want to open the letter because he didn't want to pay the nickel. And somebody finally paid it and found. So when he opened it, he found that he was president of the United States. Okay. So anyway, here's the first two stamps. Franklin and Washington. Notice the X on the 10-cent stamp. 1851, we come out of the new series of Franklin, Washington, and Washington again. 1855, a new Washington stamp. Once again, we had 10 cents spelled out, but the numerical thing is an X. People back in those days knew the Roman counting, not like kids today. 5-cent with Jefferson. 1860, a new set with once again Washington and Franklin, are very popular within the mailing. Here is a letter being mailed with two 10-cent stamps on it. Aha, a Pony Express. We notice that there is the U.S. stamp on it because to mail it, it had to have the U.S. stamp on it, but then on top of that, it gets the Pony Express stamp. So two people you were paying, the federal government and the Pony Express. Here's the mail during the Civil War. We got the early period where mail was delivered. The Confederates have left, but they don't know what they're doing, so forth and so on. So we run the mail back and forth. Finally, a decision is made. Those guys really mean they're leaving, so we aren't going to send mail to them anymore. And the express companies take over and start delivering mail north and south. That goes on for a short period officially, and the federal government says you can't do that anymore. Unofficially, the express companies keep doing it throughout the war, but they got to smuggle the mail back and forth. And then in 61 to 65, we have the flag of truce mail, in which we're doing prisoner of war exchange mail back and forth, and some official mail going back and forth between the two governments. We'll talk about this a little later. And then with the Confederates, once the Union gets control of the Mississippi River, the special rate goes in place to move mail across the Mississippi River. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. May 31, 61. U.S. Post Office no longer forwards mail to the Confederate States. John Speed, postmaster in Louisville, Kentucky, June 1861, he has had 10,000 letters come through from the South. And the light bulb goes off and says, whoa, wait a minute. These got U.S. stamps on it, but they're not sending the money from Nashville, Tennessee, this pick on, to D.C. They're sending the money to Richmond, Virginia. We aren't going to do this anymore. So he starts stamping on them, Southern leather, unpaid, and he will forward it on, but you got to pay to get it. Here we got an example of it, Southern leather, unpaid. So when it arrives at your house, if you want it here in Delaware, Ohio, you're going to have to pay for it. A close-up of it. Another one, Southern leather, unpaid, but this one actually has the due 3 cents in it. June 1, 1861, the mail service is suspended. So he doesn't have to stamp his stuff anymore. And here we got examples. Mail suspended, cannot be forwarded. So this is supposed to be going from Massachusetts to Louisiana. They're not going to forward it anymore. Sent back to England without reason for non-delivery. Well, it came into most probably New York or Philadelphia. I mean, it was supposed to, no, it came in through Boston. and it was supposed to go to Texas. It isn't going to go anymore. We're not forwarding mail to the Confederates. Here's another one, mail suspended, no mail service. It was going to Mississippi and it's been returned to New York. They started also sending the mail to the dead letter post office in Washington, and they would just collect it there and then eventually destroy it. Part of the reason was all of a sudden they're starting to get worried about, I don't know, espionage or spying, that confidential information is being sent. So they're sitting there and not allowing the mail to go through anymore. Adams Express, American Letter Express, Southern Express are still moving the letters south and north, and they're banned in August of 26 of 61. Here's American Express. Notice their emblem on the left, but a U.S. stamp on the right. So what they're doing is you put the U.S. stamp on it, you take it to the Adams Express Company, you pay an extra fee, they carry it to, let's say, Virginia, turn it over to their Adams Express guys down there, who then put on it a Confederate stamp and then mail it. Here's another one, Adams Express. They're just got a stamp, but you see they paid 10 cents for Adams Express to move it. And it's reached Augusta, Georgia on July 18th via Adams Express. Here's another one. I can't read who they are, but 10 cents they wanted for moving the letter, and there's the U.S. stamp on it. Southern Express Company paid for moving it. Oops, back one. Okay, July 1st, 1861, the U.S. Post Office says soldier letters do not require postage on them. If properly franked, the receiver then pays the 3 cents. Or if it is not properly franked, the receiver pays 6 cents. So this is the first time this has happened. A soldier does not need a stamp to mail a letter home. He simply writes up in it, whoa, here we got soldiers reading their mail. He reads, here's down in the lower right, soldier letter. A close-up of it. Another one, soldiers, free. Another one, soldier's letter, 14th Regiment, Wisconsin Volunteers. Soldier's letter. To me, this is a real step forward in looking after taking care of your soldiers. Mexican American, where all the other ones, you're basically on your own trying to get a letter home. Here, the federal government, for the first time, has stepped forward and is helping your soldier get the mail home and the mail from the home front to the soldier. It is a revolution within the mail service within this country of keeping the morale up of the soldier. One more. They were supposed to be, this one is done correctly, by the way. They were supposed to be franked by the commanding officer of the company. And you notice we got somebody in the New York Volunteers, Major somebody who's franked the thing. U.S. Christian Commission, a soldier's letter. Soldier's letter, 9th Corps Hospital, City Point, Virginia, sending it home to, I don't know, wife, mother. Another U.S. Senate Christian Commission. There is a field post office. I am just amazed that they have gone this far forward in setting up a mail service, in that you got a post office out of the field, receiving mail, sending mail out. And, it takes me back to my service in the Navy in 58 with mail call. And here we got mail call back in 1861. We got our Second Corps wagon and our soldier reading the mail. In August 1st, 61, the USP Post Office demonetized the postage stamps from 54, the early stamps. They realized that the Confederates are using them. They're coming in the U.S. mail. We're going to say these stamps are no longer any good. So, hey, we don't care that you Confederate states have them because we won't recognize them. And here is one. They've used the old stamp and it's been stamped old stamp, not recognized, and a due 3 cents down in the bottom. Here is the new issue of stamps out. Washington, Franklin, and Jefferson. And another group that they came out. In July 1, 1863, the war's going on, and we got this revolution going on in the background because the southern states have left, I guess. But no longer is mail being paid by distance. A flat 3 cents moves a letter anywhere across the country. So if you're in your unit down in Louisiana with Banks or Butler, you just drop it in for 3 cents. You're out in California with Candy, 3 cents gets it back. In other words, 3 cents moves a federal letter anywhere. And the Confederates, of course, is much difference. A major, major change. One of the major problems they had was the soldiers getting paid, and there's no money going to the family. You got to mail your mail back with your money in it. It's being stolen, it's being lost. So the U.S. Post Office came up for the soldier with money orders. Money orders. I can remember money orders in the Navy. I bought money orders because I was saving money to go to college and sitting at home. But this is part of the Civil War. One of the major changes, we now got money orders being saved. And of course, it moves out from the military throughout the economy, and we're moving money orders. I just threw this in because I don't know why we got a Masonic thing canceling the stamp, but we do. And these are some of the various covers from those days showing the stamp and the cancelizations. Amazing. We're mailing mail from New York to India. Once again, it's going to the post office, as you can see, because it's the person's name with the city in India. And you're wondering, how do they get it there? And how do they divvy up the money between the United States, the ship that moves it, and the local post office, and so forth and so on? But they did. We have our printed covers, advertising. Great American Tea Company to Australia. Okay, private local mail delivery. This was not supposed to be. The federal government fought it, but it'd pop up every once in a while. It's like UPS today or FedEx. You can argue. Anyway, so these guys would set up and move mail within the city. It was private bag. They would come to your office, pick it up, and then deliver it within the city directly to the people without going through the post office. And the post office fought this along the way, and eventually these guys were all put out of business unless they used a U.S. stamp. Here's another one, but they're using a U.S. stamp on it, so it's okay to do it. And this Eagle carrier is out of Cincinnati, Ohio. They were moving it even beyond Cincinnati. They're moving it up through Brown County and that. And you do have this where they're moving the letters on farther than the local cities. Okay, we're going to be looking at a bunch of patriotic covers. As you know, The first elephant came to the United States in 1850 by Barnum, I believe. And the big expression became, I'm going to go to town and see the elephant. And that became then the soldiers' expression. They went off to the war to see the elephant. And I saw the elephant was they got in a battle. So here we got Jumbo the elephant. Uh, where's Bogart from this? Well, they quickly found out where he was. But anyway, couple of another patriotic cover, Constitution. These were very popular, 61, 62, start falling off. Oh, advertised. Notice it was not picked up at the post office within 5 days. So they've advertised in the newspaper that it's down there at the post office and that you come down and pick it up. I was amazed talking to our local post office that they do still get mail that's delivered to the post office with the person's name and just Frankfort, Kentucky. And they sit there and hold it for so long. If there's no return address, it goes to dead letter. And they said they are amazed at the people who show up that's at working construction jobs and things like that, or homeless that just get letters, mail, something like that, and they're just delivered to the post office. Sidestep. Okay. Back into another patriotic letter. Very beautiful colored things. You know that these things had to cost a fortune to be made. Almost everything and anything you could think of to be used on a patriotic nailing the flag so it's not going to come down. Another version of it, and I assume that's supposed to be young Abe Lincoln up there. The whole hog. Uh, if you were rich, you ate the whole hog. If you were poor, you only got the pig's feet or the tail or something like that. I know my dad grew up poor because he always loved pig's feet. I never could stand that part. But mom would cook pig's feet for dad. Okay. Uh, give this wreath to the brave who their country would save. New York Artillery Regiment, the Monitor, and the Virginia. Our Union volunteers, whole hog or nothing. They're into the war. They're going to get all the flags back on the tree, whether they're Virginia, Louisiana, and that. My country and a pair exchange the plow for the sword and become a soldier for liberty's sake. I assume that's the Smithsonian up there. Anybody wants to disagree with me? Uncle Sam and Jeff Davis. McClellan, whoa, commander of the Army of the Potomac. Not sure who these guys are. I should have delved into it, but I did not. Missent letter. Generals of the Army of the Potomac. I hope you don't mind me throwing these up. I just find the designs they went through and that fascinating, and that they kept going on. But you can see those designs become less elaborate as the years go on, and they just sort of start dropping down. 34-star flag, board with the 5th New York. The 77th Illinois has their own stationery with their battles they participated in. 6th Corps 1st Division's got their own envelopes. I assume the Salter is selling these. Another one of the mail wagons with the gentleman holding the mail bag. The post office in the field. Do we have a female who's the postmistress? I don't know. They're not identified. Another mail wagon. So you can see from the mail wagons and that this is an organized thing. It's not being done on the fly, that it is recognized within the federal army. And it's amazing, I find, that there's no real talking about this, but this has got to be an integrated part of the military. And I guess it's just one of those things. Oh, it's there, so there it is. It's like they say, oh, there's a blockhouse over there. Well, what would the blockhouse look like? I don't know. Well, anyway, a U.S. Navy cover. Since you're sending them to ships, they were sent to the naval yards. They were sent either the New York Naval Yard or the Philadelphia Naval Yard, at which point they were put on a supply ship that was going down along the coast to call at the various naval stations and ships and would drop the mail off that way and pick up return mail to bring back. Whereas when I was in the Navy, we had fleet post offices. Nowadays, they got zip codes for those various ships. In those days, we had just the New York Naval Yard and the Philadelphia Naval Yard where you sent your mail to, addressed to who and the ship, and then off it went. There's another one. This one's been returned, however, because they said they can't find the person. Civil War USO. Volunteer refreshment stand. I'm calling them a USO. Sidestep. When I was working as a docent at the local Civil War park, there was a girl that showed up, man and woman, I should say, from San Francisco. And I jokingly said to her, I remember you. I danced with you at the USO in San Francisco. And she said, I worked there. When did you dance there? And I said, 58, 59. And she said, that's when I worked there. And that's where she met her husband there. So who knows? U.S. Sanitary Commission came out with letterhead that was provided to the soldiers. Okay, we got the Confederate Post Office being formed. They take over the U.S. Post Office. They use the low U.S. stamps. As I said, they're making money. They cut mail service back to 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They closed some 10% of the post offices. And of course, they're slowly closing post offices throughout the war, where the Union is expanding the post offices in California and Nevada. Plus, they're having to reestablish post offices as they retake areas back in the Union. Yet they're doing it on the same same 3 cents anyway. So we got a letter using a U.S. stamp in the early days being sent from Charleston. They're using the U.S. stamps. They're sending it overseas to Belgium. So it must have gone on a blockade runner. Now, they quickly run out of stamps. And they go to dies or stamped on them. And here are some what the local postmaster made up and stamps on the thing. And up in the corner, he's got paid 5 cents with his name up there. paid 5 cents. And notice they used some sort of artistic talent here and there to put these together. But, you know, could you just go and make your own and stamp it and nobody would know the difference and throw it in the mail? I guess so. They also come out with some patriotic. Oh, this one is mailed from Camp Beauregard in Kentucky. I got a couple other ones, Kentucky, out there. This was out in the Purchase area. Purchase area being far western Kentucky, west of the Tennessee River. So called the Purchase area because Andrew Jackson purchased it from the Cherokee, even though the Cherokee didn't own it, but it was a way to get it. Okay, anyway. Another one of those paid ones, and another, and one more. So you can see there's all sorts of designs put out by the local postmaster of what he thought it should look like. Yeah. So now we got CSS postage due stamps. And once again, it's a stamp. They don't have any stamps, and they've run out of US stamps. They got their patriotic envelopes or covers, using the correct thing. Now, in the Confederacy, unlike the North, where everybody had free franking, senators, representatives, various cabinet people, and a whole host of other people, only the post office had free franking. Even President Davis had to use stamps. And here is a letter with free frank, even though they're using a U.S. stamp on it. Okay, now we come out with the local stamps. The local postmasters start printing their own stamps because they can't get stamped from Richmond. So they're organizing these. Now, you see these things for sale on eBay. My deal on it is anything that's a Confederate stamp, Confederate money, or anything like that is a fake. It may be real, but as far as I'm concerned, it's a fake because too much of the stuff out there is fake or replicas. Anyway, another one done by one of the local post offices. Very fancy. And we do know that a number of these were found after the war and were used to create much longer after the war was over with envelopes to be sold during the 1880s and 1890s and 1900s when there was a craze, when the stamp collecting craze started. So if there isn't enough around, I'll create my own and sell them. So I'm going to assume the majority of these are legit. I got them out of a catalog of a legitimate number of catalogs of legitimate stamp dealers, but so you can see they're from very fancy to crude what these local postmasters are turning out. And I don't see how you're keeping track of the money. I would assume a lot of the money went in the local postmaster's pocket. I shouldn't be saying that, and didn't get to Richmond because the people in Richmond got no control over these stamps. They got no control over how many have been printed, how many sold, and so forth and so on. So, interesting. But anyway, just throwing up a bunch of them. Once again, that's pasted over a U.S. stamp, and I don't understand why they've done that because the U.S. stamps were good, and it doesn't like unless it had already been canceled. Okay, October 61, the Confederates come out with their first stamps. They ordered the plates from England. and the plates come over. Some of the first stamps are printed in England and are brought in. A whole bunch of them are seized on a blockade runner, and the feds get them, and they later sell them off. Hey, they're legitimate stamps, and they get in the stamp. Oh, well, beside the point. Now, one of the problems you have, excuse me, is there is no quality control. The inks are different, the papers are different, the impressions are different, even though you're using the same dye. There's no consistency. Well, they're supposed to be this color, but the colors vary, the papers vary, and how well it was impressed in the paper varies. So they're all supposed to be legitimate stamps. So we got John C. Calhoun on the first 1 penny stamp. Andrew Jackson, which I always find funny because Andrew Jackson said when South Carolina was going to succeed while he was president, you ain't going to do it. I'm going to send the troops down there and stop it. Yet he becomes a hero of the Confederate States. I don't understand it anyway. Another Andrew Jackson. Jefferson Davis. This, in the U.S. stamps, supposedly there's never been a live person on the stamps. We know that isn't quite true because they've used drawings that people were live, they're still in, but no live person has ever been featured as the primary person. You got to be dead for so long before you can go on a U.S. stamp. But here they're using Jefferson Davis. Thomas Jefferson being another one of their heroes. Notice it's blue here and it's red here. How do you know? I don't know. That's why I say, as far as I'm concerned, they're all fakes. You've all been to Gettysburg and you've gone into the souvenir stores and they're selling Confederate money and Confederate stamps, right? Right. Souvenirs. Anyway, here we go on with their patriotic thing with the stamp on top of the flag. A local provisional stamp and then a genuine stamp, supposedly. 7th Regiment, Mississippi Volunteers, paid. Notice you don't have soldiers' mail in the South. To arms, quick and ready. Think what the South has been. Onward, onward, strong and steady. Drive the vandals to their dens, and lo, let's watch her be. Country, home, and liberty. And I took 2 years Latin, and I should be able to translate that, but I can't. And notice how crude the stamps are and how different they are. And they are not perforated, they're cut or they're torn to put on. So, and here we got once again a U.S. stamp and a Confederate stamp. Men of the South, arise, arise, hurl back the invading foe. Sort of bouncing through these little fast, but give you, and notice, I hope you've been noticing, the ink varies so much between stamps, how faded some are because the plates are getting older from use, or they're not impressed as hard as they should be, and other things. How you go about authenticating a Confederate stamp as being a Confederate stamp, I don't know. And I've always wondered when they put them the stamps upside down, is that a signal that we're fed up with the Confederacy or what? I don't know. Or why they're on the left side at one time, right on the other, sideways. Uh, during World War II, that was one of the way you conveyed messages to your wife and girlfriend by the way you positioned the stamp. And once again, the ink's very different between that one and the previous one. 64, they're still doing it. I'd love to see this one in that beautiful river steamer on there. Once again, on top of a U.S. stamp, certifying that the vote has been taken. Confederate Navy, uh, Memphis, Tennessee, riding back to Richmond. It's got his name on the top and it's due 10 cents. It's in early 62, while there's no stamps floating around. Wallpaper mail. You've all heard about wallpaper, that they ran out of paper in the South, so they had to take wallpaper down and use it for envelopes and stuff. Maybe they did, but I find myself saying, is this all fake? Has this been counterfeited? I don't know. So I'm not going to spend $100 for anything like this. I'll give you 50 cents. Or I'll copy it off of eBay. I just, maybe these are sample books that they've gone and taken the samples out of it. But it just so lost causey to me that we're having to use wallpaper and I don't know. Maybe somebody out there can correct me on that. Okay. The Mississippi River has been cut so that mail going across the Mississippi River now costs 40 cents. They're using special agents to do it. They're not using steamboats. They're rowing across in a skiff or a canoe. They're just carrying a little bit. You can't move big things back and across, and you're paying 40% to do this. The letters are marked to Madridian Albanian or Shreveport or Alexandria. The Madridian Albanian east of the Mississippi, Shreveport, Alexandria west, and that's where they come, and that's where they're given to the runners who are then going to carry it across the river. And here you are with a 40-cent one, sent from Richmond, I'm assuming, to Texas. And this one is, I assume, sent from somewhere east to Shreveport. CSA mail to Europe on blockade runners. Here we have a blockade runner going. No stamp on it, and I'm not too sure how this is handled. We also got Confederate mail coming in from Europe, and you occasionally read about blockade runner that's been captured with the mail on board. And here it is coming in, and there's a due stamp on it in the Confederacy for receiving it. From what I understand, from what reading I've done, is that the mail would have been taken to, let's say, Wilmington, and given to a ship chandler there who would have given him some money to. And then he would have handed it off with some money to a blockade runner who then would have taken it to Bermuda, put stamps on it or whatever, and put it in the mail system to get it to where it was going. Same way coming back in, the mail was generally not through a mail system, but it was given to a shipping company who handed it off in England to a ship going to Bermuda, delivering the stuff. It's going to a warehouse. It's going to go on a blockade runner that's going to take it in. That's my understanding. Jefferson Davis wrote a letter to Thomas Ruffin. There it is. Or at least that's what they say. I put this one in because this is during that short period the Confederates control Kentucky. They moved up. Leonidas Polk moved up and took Columbus on the Mississippi River in Kentucky against laws, the rules. You have Floyd moving up to Fort Henry and Fort Donelson, Johnson to Bowling Green, Zollicoffer to Cumberland Gap to Mill Springs. And they're in Kentucky for a short time. Thomas defeats Zollicoffer at Mill Springs, and Grant defeats Floyd and the other people at Fort Henry and Fort Donelson. And as a report, Johnson pulls out. I don't know when Bragg and Kirby Smith come in Kentucky in 62, whether there was post office established or not. I sort of doubt it. There is a lot of hullabaloo about Confederate post office in Kentucky, 63, 64, 65, but they really are just messengers who gather up the mail and try to carry it through the federal line, which I don't think would have been that hard to do, and take them down the Confederacy. POW truce flag mail. We talked about that. There is first at Nunn, then it's done at Norfolk, Old Point Comfort. Norfolk is then captured by the Union, so they move it over to Petersburg and Old Point Comfort. And then you got Nunn because there's a fear of espionage and the African American, the colored soldier problem starts popping up. And then they finally sort of sort it out and they go back to Flag of Truth exchange. And here's one from Fort Delaware. You notice that they need both a U.S. stamp and a Confederate stamp on it. Letter examined by Johnson Allen up in Ohio. Sandusky on it. There's the U.S. stamp on it, but we got to do 10 cents stamp for when it gets to the Confederacy. Again, we got one from Johnson Allen. It's got the U.S. stamp on it, and it's got the Confederate stamp on it. And I assume it's going to his wife, since it's from the Lapsey, how you pronounce it. And of course, Johnson Allen's where they kept Confederate officers at. And we got the big Copperheads conspiracy to set them free in 64, which never comes off. But anyway, neat story. And another one via Fort Monroe. Union mail from Covington, Kentucky. I did this as a Kentucky presentation, so I stuck it in. And of course, Union mail from Frankfort. And here we have it. The Girl I Left Behind. A very tear-jerking little composing there, but sending it off. This is one that has got us confused. The Louisville and Frankfort Railroad. I'm going to back up and tell you. In 1831, they built a railroad from Lexington, Kentucky to Frankfort, the Lexington, Ohio. It goes into default and is reorganized as Lexington and Frankfort. In 1855, they built a railroad, 1850, from Louisville to Frankfort, the Louisville and Frankfort Railroad. They operate these railroads during the war as the Louisville, Frankfort, and Lexington. So you will see them in the ORs as Louisville and Frankfort and Lexington Railroad. But we got this cancellation on this letter. Louisville and Frankfort. I have a friend who owns this. And we can't figure out why they're canceling a letter because there is no cancellation. There's no railroad post office cars. The railroad is moving mail in bulk from post office to post office. But here we got a letter which apparently has been hand stamped and is going to Georgia. I don't know. So anyway, that's all, folks. Glad you listened to me, put up with me. And if we got questions, I'll try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. That is amazing. And I gotta say, your images are wonderful. I mean, the vivid colors were outstanding. I think that the mount was perfect. I think the examples were really wonderful. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then I'm going to read to you a couple questions from the chat, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience to unmute and ask away too. Just give me 1 second.